Welcome, dear listener, to another journey back in time where the echoes of history become our lullaby. Tonight, we travel to an age of steel and honor, where the clash of swords mingles with whispers of chivalry. As the modern world fades from your thoughts, allow the gentle flow of history to carry you toward peaceful slumber, wrapping you in tales from centuries past. This experience is designed to help you unwind, to let the tensions of your day dissolve as we explore the fascinating realities of medieval life together. Historical truth, told softly, has a remarkable power to calm the mind and prepare it for rest. I'm always curious to know where in our global community you're listening from. Perhaps you're settling in for the night, or maybe this tale accompanies your afternoon respite. Please share in the comments where you are and what time of day it is in your corner of the world. I find such joy in seeing how these historical journeys connect us across continents and time zones. If these journeys into the past bring you comfort, consider subscribing so you never miss our next expedition through time. Each story is a doorway to another era, waiting to transport you away from modern concerns. Now, let us leave behind the hum of electricity and the glow of screens. Close your eyes if you wish, and follow me to the 13th century, where the morning sun rises over stone walls and the air fills with the distant sounds of preparation for a grand tournament. Thomas could scarcely believe his fortune as he stood at the edge of the tournament field, the morning dew still clinging to the trampled grass beneath his feet. At 15 years of age, this was his first time witnessing such a spectacle, having only recently been appointed as squire to Sir William of Pembroke, a knight of considerable reputation throughout the realm. "Stay close, boy," Sir William had instructed earlier that morning while Thomas helped secure the knight's mail hauberk. "Watch carefully today. One day it shall be you upon that field, if you prove worthy of your spurs." The words had sent a thrill of excitement and terror coursing through Thomas's veins, emotions that still battled within him as he watched the knights assembling. The tournament grounds sprawled before him like a tapestry come to life. Colorful pavilions dotted the periphery, their banners snapping in the spring breeze, while wooden stands had been erected for noble spectators who were now taking their places amid laughter and conversation. "The Earl of Warwick's champion has broken 3 lances already this season," whispered an older squire beside Thomas, pointing toward a towering figure whose shield bore the image of a rampant bear. "They say he knocked Sir Geoffrey clean off his horse at Winchester, and the man didn't wake for 2 days afterward." Thomas studied the knight with newfound apprehension, noting how, even from a distance, one could see the dents and scars on his armor. Badges of violent encounters survived. The herald's trumpet pierced the morning air, silencing the crowd as the first competitors took their positions at opposite ends of the list. Thomas watched, transfixed, as Sir William lowered his visor and accepted his lance from another squire. Even through the steel helmet, Thomas could hear his master's labored breathing. Not from fear, he realized, but from the sheer effort of supporting the weight of his armor while seated upon his massive destrier. The horses pawed at the ground impatiently, sensing the tension in the riders. When the second trumpet sounded, the earth seemed to tremble as the knights spurred forward, their lances leveled with deadly precision. What followed was both glorious and terrible to behold. The impact when the knights met at the center of the field produced a sound like thunder, splinters from the shattered lance flying in all directions as Sir William's opponent was lifted nearly out of his saddle. The crowd roared its approval, ladies waving silk handkerchiefs, while men pounded their fists against wooden railings. Yet when the defeated knight's squires helped remove his helmet, Thomas saw blood streaming from the man's nose, and noticed how he winced when attempting to raise his right arm. "That's his 3rd bout today," remarked a nearby man-at-arms. "He won't be lifting a sword for a fortnight. Mark my words." It was Thomas's first glimpse of the physical cost that lay beneath the pageantry. The price paid in bruised ribs, dislocated shoulders, and concussed minds. The days following the tournament introduced Thomas to the relentless regimen that forged knights from ordinary men. He was awakened before dawn by Sir William's gruff voice. "Up, boy. The sword grows no lighter with sleep." Bleary-eyed, Thomas would help his master don a padded gambeson before joining him in the castle's training yard, where the first light of day revealed their breath as mist in the cool morning air. Sir William was merciless in his instruction, making Thomas swing a weighted practice sword until his arms trembled with exhaustion. "Again," he would command whenever Thomas's form faltered. "Your enemy will not grant you rest because you are tired. Neither shall I." By midday, Thomas's training shifted to the quintain, a rotating target mounted on a post that would swing around to strike an unprepared rider. His first attempts were humiliating, the wooden arm catching him squarely across the back as he failed to spur his horse away quickly enough after striking the shield. "A knight fights as one with his mount," Sir William explained, helping Thomas to his feet after a particularly hard fall. "Your horse must respond to the pressure of your knees, the shift of your weight, as naturally as your own limbs obey your thoughts. This takes not days or weeks, but years." The afternoon hours were devoted to wrestling and dagger work, teaching Thomas how to fight when unhorsed or disarmed. Skills that Sir William insisted were often the difference between life and death on the battlefield. As weeks passed, Thomas's body transformed under the punishing schedule. Blisters on his hands hardened to calluses. Muscles that once screamed in protest now merely ached at day's end. He learned to care for weapons and armor with the same attention a mother might give her child, oiling blades to prevent rust, mending the smallest tear in leather strapping, polishing mail links to prevent corrosion. "A knight neglects his equipment at his peril," Sir William would say, inspecting Thomas's work with a critical eye. "In battle, your life depends upon these tools as surely as it depends upon your skill." One evening, as summer's warmth began to give way to autumn's chill, Sir William summoned Thomas to the armory. Candles cast long shadows across the stone walls as the knight gestured to a complete set of armor arranged upon a wooden stand. "Come here, boy," he said, lifting the chainmail hauberk. "It's time you understood what you're training for." Thomas stepped forward, unprepared for the shocking weight as Sir William dropped the garment into his arms. The boy staggered, nearly dropping to one knee before regaining his balance. 40 pounds of steel rings, the knight explained, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And that's before the plate, the helmet, the sword, gaur, and shield. A knight carries the weight of a small man upon his body into battle." Sir William helped Thomas don the full armor piece by piece. First the padded gambeson, then the heavy mail, followed by plate greaves for his legs and vambraces for his arms. With each addition, Thomas felt his mobility diminishing, his breathing becoming more labored. When at last the helmet was lowered over his head, the world shrank to what he could see through the narrow eye slit. "Now walk," Sir William commanded. Thomas took a tentative step, then another, feeling sweat already beginning to soak through his underclothes despite the cool evening air. "This is what awaits you," the knight continued, circling Thomas as he struggled to move with any grace. "This is the physical burden of knighthood, but it is not the heaviest weight you will bear." Sir William removed the helmet from Thomas's head, allowing the boy to gulp fresh air gratefully. "The true weight of knighthood lies here," the knight said, placing his hand over his heart. "The vows you will take, to protect the weak, to speak the truth, to show mercy, to defend your faith. These will burden your soul far more than steel ever burdens your body." In the flickering candlelight, Thomas saw something he had never before witnessed in his master's eyes: vulnerability. There will come moments when these vows conflict, when honor seems to demand one action and mercy another. In those moments, you will truly understand the weight of the spurs. As they carefully removed each piece of armor, returning it to its stand, Sir William spoke of battles long past, of choices that still haunted his dreams. I tell you these things not to frighten you, Thomas, but to prepare you. The songs speak of glory, but they rarely mention the cost. A true knight must be ready to pay that cost, not just with his body, but with his conscience. Thomas listened in solemn silence, understanding for the first time that the path he had chosen was not merely one of skill and strength, but of profound moral responsibility. The armor, now inanimate upon its stand, seemed to watch them, a hollow metal man waiting for the flesh and spirit that would give it purpose. The summons came at harvest time. Thomas had been a squire for 3 years when King Edward's royal decree arrived at Pembroke Castle, calling all able knights to muster for campaign in France. Sir William received the news with a grim nod, his weathered face betraying neither excitement nor dread, only the quiet resignation of a man who had answered such calls many times before. Pack for a long journey, he instructed Thomas. Not just weapons and armor, but needle and thread, spare boots, and anything that might bring comfort on cold nights. The greatest enemy on campaign is rarely the French. It's hunger, wet feet, and the creeping despair of discomfort. The preparations consumed a fortnight. Thomas watched as the castle transformed into a hive of activity. Blacksmiths working through the night to repair armor and sharpen blades. Women sewing padded gambesons and packing preserved foods. Priests offering special blessings for those departing. When they finally rode out, their column stretched nearly half a mile. 20 knights, their squires, men-at-arms, archers, servants, cooks, farriers, and wagons laden with supplies. Thomas felt his heart swell with pride as villagers lined the road, offering flowers and prayers for their safe return. That pride dimmed considerably after 3 weeks on muddy roads. Autumn rains had turned much of the countryside into a quagmire, and their pace slowed to a miserable crawl. "This is why kings start wars in spring," Sir William muttered one evening, as they struggled to establish camp in a sodden field. "But politics waits for no season." Thomas nodded, too exhausted to reply as he helped erect their small tent. His hands were raw from the constant dampness. His lower back ached from sleeping on the hard ground, and the excitement of departure had long since faded into the monotony of daily travel. The crossing to France brought new hardships. Thomas had never been at sea before, and spent most of the journey retching over the side of the heaving transport ship. Sir William, seemingly unaffected by the pitching deck, merely handed him a cloth to wipe his mouth. "The Channel has claimed more knight's dignity than any French sword," he said with rare humor. "You'll find your sea legs eventually, or we'll reach shore, whichever comes first." It was shore that came first, much to Thomas's relief, though the foreign soil beneath his feet still seemed to sway for hours afterward. France proved both beautiful and hostile. Villages emptied at their approach, locals driving livestock into forests and hiding food stores. "They've seen too many armies," Sir William explained, as they passed through another abandoned hamlet. "English, French, Burgundian. To them, we're all the same threat." Their supplies began to dwindle faster than anticipated. Hunting parties were sent out daily, but game was scarce in the picked-over countryside. By the 6th week of their journey, rations had been cut twice, and the mood among the men darkened with each passing day. Winter arrived early that year, bringing bitter winds that cut through cloaks and froze water in skins overnight. Thomas awoke one morning to find a thin layer of ice inside their tent. "We lost 2 horses in the night," Sir William informed him grimly, "and Sir Geoffrey's squire has fever. We must reach the main army within the week, or we'll start losing men as well. They pushed harder, riding from dawn until dusk, stopping only when darkness made the treacherous roads impassable. Thomas learned to sleep in the saddle, his body swaying in unconscious rhythm with his mount's gait. When they finally joined the king's host, the sight took Thomas's breath away. Thousands of tents spread across the valley like a vast cloth city. Banners from every noble house in England fluttered in the wind, while smoke from hundreds of cooking fires created a haze above the encampment. 20,000 men, Sir William estimated, surveying the scene. Perhaps more, the largest army assembled since Crécy. But Thomas also noted the mud, the crude latrines, the gaunt faces of soldiers who had been waiting here for weeks. This was no tournament ground. It was a place where men prepared to kill and die. Word spread quickly through the camp that night. Battle would be joined on the morrow. The French army had been sighted just 3 leagues distant, and the king had decided to force an engagement rather than allow them to choose more favorable ground. In the knight's section of camp, a strange calm descended. Veterans like Sir William methodically prepared their equipment, checking straps, oiling mail, sharpening blades with slow, deliberate strokes of whetstone. A knight must make peace with himself before battle, Sir William explained as he worked. Check your equipment thrice, confess your sins, write letters to those you love. Leave nothing undone that would haunt you if tomorrow brings your end. Thomas helped Sir William into his armor before dawn, his fingers trembling slightly as he secured each buckle and strap. The knight knelt in prayer afterward, his lips moving silently in the dim light of their single candle. Across the tent, Thomas noticed something he had never seen before, a small wooden carving of a woman and child that Sir William had placed carefully beside his helmet. The knight caught his gaze but offered no explanation, simply tucking the carving into a pouch beneath his breastplate when his prayers were complete. In stark contrast to the knight's quiet preparations, the common soldier's camp roiled with nervous energy. As Thomas carried messages between commanders, he passed through areas where conscripted peasants huddled around fires, some singing bawdy songs with forced bravado, others silently staring into flames. A group of archers gambled away their meager possessions, laughing too loudly at poor jests. "Better to have nothing when you die," one explained when he caught Thomas watching. "Saves the next man the trouble of stealing it." Nearby, a priest moved among the men, offering hasty blessings and absolution to lines of anxious faces. Dawn broke cold and misty as the army formed its battle lines. Thomas stood behind Sir William, holding his lance and shield, watching as thousands of men arranged themselves according to ancient traditions of war, knights and men-at-arms in the center, archers on the flanks, reserves to the rear. The king rode past their position, resplendent in gilded armor, offering words of encouragement that few could hear, but all cheered nonetheless. Thomas felt his heart hammering against his ribs, fear and excitement mingling until he could scarcely tell them apart. When the French appeared through the morning mist, their own lines stretching across the opposite ridge, the world seemed to hold its breath. For one eternal moment, there was perfect stillness, 2 great forces regarding each other across a soon-to-be bloodied field. Then horns blared, drums pounded, and the earth itself began to tremble as thousands of men surged forward. Sir William mounted his war-horse, accepted his lance and shield from Thomas with a curt nod, and lowered his visor. "Stay with the reserves," were his final words before he spurred forward to join the advancing line of knights. The battle engulfed the valley like a living storm. Thomas watched in horror and awe as the ordered lines dissolved into chaos within moments of contact. The sound defied description. Thousands of metal-clad bodies colliding, horses screaming, men shouting in triumph or agony. The constant ring of steel on steel creating a deafening cacophony that seemed to physical force. Even from the reserve position, The noise was overwhelming, making it impossible to hear commands unless they were shouted directly into one's ear. When the reserves were finally called forward, Thomas found himself running across ground, already slick with blood and strewn with bodies. The elegant formations depicted in training manuals existed nowhere in this churning mass of desperate combat. Knights fought on foot after being unhorsed. Archers had abandoned their bows for knives, and everywhere men grappled in the mud, using whatever advantage they could find. Thomas searched frantically for Sir William's distinctive crest amid the press of bodies, ducking beneath a swinging mace and stumbling over a fallen standard-bearer. He found Sir William surrounded by 3 French men-at-arms, fighting with his back to a fallen horse. The knight's shield had been splintered, his helmet dented on one side, but his sword moved with the same precision Thomas had witnessed countless times in the practice yard. Thomas didn't remember drawing his own blade, only that suddenly he was there beside his master, parrying a thrust meant for Sir William's exposed flank. Together they fought their way toward a knot of English knights who were maintaining a tenuous formation amid the chaos. "Hold the line!" The cry echoed across the battlefield as a commander struggled to maintain some semblance of order. Men pressed shoulder to shoulder, creating walls of steel against which waves of enemies broke and reformed. Thomas found himself crushed between Sir William and another knight, barely able to lift his arm to swing his sword, yet somehow finding the strength when needed. The air grew thick with dust and the copper scent of blood. Each breath became a struggle, drawn through clenched teeth and a sweat-soaked arming cap that had slipped down over his eyes. Hours passed in a blur of desperate moments. Thomas saw men he had shared meals with for weeks fall beneath French blades. He watched a knight he knew, only as Sir Hugh take 3 arrows to the chest, yet continue fighting for several minutes before finally collapsing. The ground beneath their feet transformed into a treacherous morass of mud, blood, and discarded weapons. Twice their position was nearly overrun, saved only by the timely arrival of reinforcements or the inspired leadership of veteran knights who rallied those around them with hoarse battle cries. When the French finally withdrew as evening approached, Thomas could scarcely believe they had survived. Sir William's armor bore a dozen new dents, and blood seeped from a gash in his thigh, yet he remained standing as so many others had fallen. The field before them was a tableau of suffering, the wounded crying for water, the dead staring sightlessly at the darkening sky. "This," Sir William said quietly, removing his dented helmet with hands that trembled from exhaustion, "is the truth of knighthood that no song will ever capture. Remember it well, Thomas. Remember every face, every cry, every moment. This is the cost of the oaths we swear." The moans of the wounded formed a terrible chorus as Thomas followed Sir William toward the surgeon's tent, a large pavilion stained with the evidence of its grim purpose. Blood darkened the grass around its entrance, where men waited their turn, clutching at wounds or lying motionless on makeshift pallets. The smell hit Thomas first, a nauseating mixture of blood, sweat, and something fouler that he would later recognize as festering flesh. "Stay close," Sir William instructed, his own limp becoming more pronounced as the battle's fervor faded from his body. "The surgeons will see to the knights first, but do not think that makes our suffering any less." Inside the tent, the scene struck Thomas with the force of a mace. Trestle tables had been arranged in rows, each bearing a man in various states of agony. Surgeons and their assistants moved between them with grim efficiency, their aprons so soaked with blood they appeared black in the flickering torchlight. A knight Thomas recognized from their company lay unconscious as a surgeon probed a deep wound in his shoulder with iron tools. "Wine," called the surgeon to his assistant. "More wine for Lord Geoffrey." The assistant poured the liquid directly into the wound, causing the unconscious knight to jerk violently despite his state. "Hold him," barked the surgeon, before returning to his probing. Nearby, another man screamed as a surgeon applied a red-hot iron to cauterize the stump where his arm had been. Sir William was directed to a bench, where he removed his armor with Thomas's help, revealing the full extent of his thigh wound. "Not deep enough to take the leg," the surgeon announced after examination, though his casual tone offered Thomas little comfort. "You'll need stitching, and I've a poultice of garlic and wine to draw out corruption." As the surgeon worked, Thomas watched a monk move among the wounded, offering prayers and last rites in equal measure. In one corner, a soldier sobbed as another surgeon extracted arrowheads from his back with a pair of long pincers. The man bit down on a leather strap, his screams muffled but no less haunting. "This is where battles truly end, Thomas," Sir William said through gritted teeth as the needle pierced his flesh again and again. "Not when the enemy retreats, but here, in blood and pain. Remember this when you hear tales of glorious victory." 3 weeks later, they approached the walls of Pembroke Castle, their company diminished by nearly a third. Those who remained were changed men, quieter, older somehow, even the youngest among them. Thomas rode beside Sir William, whose wound had healed enough for travel, though he still winced when his horse took an uneven step. The castle's inhabitants poured from the gates to greet them, cheering and waving banners. Children ran alongside their horses, begging for tales of bravery. Women searched anxiously for husbands and sons, their faces lighting with joy or crumpling in grief as the returning men were recognized. Musicians played triumphant melodies that seemed jarringly discordant to Thomas's ears after weeks of hearing nothing but groans of pain and the creaking of cartwheels bearing the wounded. "Smile, Thomas," Sir William instructed quietly. "They need to believe in the glory of it all." That evening, a feast was held in the great hall to celebrate their return. Minstrels sang of their courage, embellishing the battle into something Thomas barely recognized. A clean, heroic affair where good triumphed, and the fallen died noble, painless deaths. Sir William sat at the high table, accepting congratulations with practiced grace, though Thomas noticed how he barely touched his wine and how his eyes seemed focused on something distant. Later, when most had retired or succumbed to drunken slumber, Thomas found Sir William alone in the small chapel, staring at the carved wooden figures of saints. "They celebrate what they cannot understand," the knight said without turning, "and perhaps that is mercy." He gestured to his leg, which he had been massaging. "The wound pains me most at night. The surgeon says it may always trouble me when rain approaches." He gave a humorless laugh. "A knight who can predict the weather, perhaps I should become a farmer." Thomas remained silent, understanding that Sir William needed no response. "The hardest part," the knight continued after a moment, "is not the pain. It is wearing the mask they need to see. The hero returning victorious, untouched by doubt or fear." He finally turned to Thomas. "That is also part of our duty, to bear the truth alone so others may sleep peacefully." 20 years passed like the turning of seasons. Thomas's hair had begun to gray at the temples, and he had long since earned his spurs, becoming Sir Thomas of Pembroke after Sir William had sponsored his knighthood. He had fought in 3 campaigns, led men into battle, and carried his own scars, both visible and hidden. Now he stood in the training yard of Pembroke Castle, watching a group of young squires practice their swordplay. Sir William sat nearby on a stone bench, his once powerful frame bent with age, the leg that had been wounded at Crécy now permanently stiff. Though he no longer trained knights himself, the old warrior's counsel was still sought by all. "That one shows promise," Sir William remarked, pointing with his walking stick toward a fair-haired youth who moved with natural grace. "He reminds me of you, many years ago." Thomas nodded, seeing the same eagerness in the boy's eyes that he once possessed. "He asks for tales of battle every evening, wants to know how many men I've killed." How many banners I've captured. Sir William chuckled, though the sound held little mirth. And what do you tell him? I tell him what you taught me, that the measure of a knight is not in how many he defeats, but in how many he protects. Thomas paused, watching the squires. I don't think he believes me yet. He will, Sir William said softly. After his first real battle, they all do. They sat in companionable silence, two men who understood each other in ways no song or poem could capture. The code of chivalry that had guided their lives hung between them, both burden and blessing, both shield and chain. I wonder sometimes, Thomas admitted, if I have done right by the vows I took, if mercy shown to an enemy cost the lives of innocents later, if truth spoken harshly wounded where silence might have healed. Sir William nodded slowly. The doubt is what makes you worthy of the spurs. A knight without questions is no true knight at all. He gestured toward the practicing squires. That is what you must teach them when they are ready. Not just how to fight, but when and why. Not just how to die bravely, but how to live honorably with what they've seen and done. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the training yard, Thomas helped Sir William to his feet. The old knight leaned heavily on both Thomas and his walking stick, but his eyes remained clear and sharp as they watched the next generation prepare for burdens they could not yet imagine. The songs get it wrong, you know, Sir William said as they walked slowly toward the keep. They speak of glory and honor as if they are bright, shining things. But true honor is heavier than any armor, and real glory is quieter than any trumpet. He stopped, looking Thomas directly in the eyes. Remember that, when I am gone. Remember to tell them the truth, when they are strong enough to bear it.